Hello, and welcome to this installment of the Transition Education Series, Home for the Holidays, presented by the Mary and Dick Allen Diabetes Center at Hoag Hospital in collaboration with Children's Health of Orange County. I'm Samantha Markovitz. I'm a National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach and Supervisor of Health and Wellness Initiatives here at the Diabetes Center, and I'm joined here by my colleague from CHOC, Michelle Kennedy.
And my name is Michelle Kennedy, and I am a social worker, and I am the transition coordinator at the Diabetes Center at Children's Hospital of Orange County. We're so glad to have you guys all here with us to talk about the holidays and some of the potential challenges, as well as the good things that come along with that. Next slide. So this education series is brought to you by our team at CHOC, as well as our partner team at Hoag at the Mary and Dick Allen Diabetes Center. We want to make sure to let you know that the session is being recorded and will be made available for you to view in the future at the Hoag Health channel on youtube.com. Additionally, you are free to enter any questions or comments you have into the Q&A box throughout our time together today. We'll do our best to address all of the comments and questions either throughout our presentation or at the end. And we want to make sure that we are getting to everything that we can. So thank you guys all for participating, and we look forward to hearing from you. Next slide.
Thanks for getting us started, Michelle. As we all know, there's a lot to cover when it comes to type 1 diabetes and the holiday season. So we're going to do our best to cover as much as we can. Like Michelle said, we're going to cover topics like communication, travel, spending time back home with friends and family, and encouraging mutual love and support during this learning stage of transition and being home for the holidays. Next slide, please. All right, let's get started. The holiday season and type 1 diabetes. Next slide, please. So I think we're all in agreement here. Everyone wants to have a joyous holiday season, and we want to think about how do we set ourselves up for the best possible scenario. We're going to look at some of the potential pitfalls of this time and also look at how we can not just mitigate those issues, but hopefully learn from the experience of navigating them, whether it's your first time or it's your second, third, or beyond. So even for people without diabetes, the holiday season can bring a lot of emotions. This can be a difficult time of year for a lot of people. And then for people with diabetes, the focus on carb-heavy foods can be really tough, whether you're newly diagnosed and just figuring out how to handle a holiday meal like Thanksgiving or Christmas or any other holiday. You may also have been doing this for a long time and you're just frustrated by the fact that you have to act like your own pancreas during the holidays while everyone is just seemingly enjoying themselves. So that's one thing that people might be grappling with. We may also be looking forward to things like seeing family or helping with holiday meal preparation and doing things that are part of the hallmarks of the season. And even still, when we're looking forward to things, sometimes those things can still bring stressors. And those stressors can be tough on our emotional health, our mental health, and also on just the physical piece of keeping blood sugars in line and managing diabetes. If this is your first time returning to your family home after going away to school or establishing yourself outside of your family home, this can be a tough time as well. You may not know how to see if this is going to play out the way that you expected or maybe differently. And so there may be some questions there. You may also be wondering how you're going to be splitting your time, who you're going to see while you're home, as well as maybe what your family's expectations are about how much time you'll be spending doing family activities. So there can be some friction that comes from that. It's also important to note that holidays may not evoke warmth for everyone. We're mindful that not everyone is coming home to the same environment. For some, home may be a place that feels warm and safe and rejuvenating. And for others, it may be a stressful, chaotic, or unstable situation. And some of the information that we're going to go over today may not fit with your particular situation. So please know that you are free to take what makes sense for you and apply it to your life, and leave behind anything that feels less applicable or doesn't feel like it's comfortable for you in your situation. And we also want to note that we understand not everyone has a traditional parent figure at home. Families come in all shapes and sizes, certainly. But for the purposes of our presentation today, we'll probably use the word parent fairly frequently to identify the adult at home that you're communicating with as kind of the head of household. So with that, we can move on to the next slide. So we're going to be diving into communication. We cannot emphasize this enough. Communication is absolutely key to managing everyone's expectations, minimize that friction that we're talking about, and really just get everyone on the same page in advance as much as possible. There's also the reminder to keep yourself and your needs for your physical health and your overall well-being at the top of mind throughout this season. And you can utilize your self-advocacy skills in all of these situations that we'll be talking about. And if you are wondering what self-advocacy is or how it may apply to you in your life with diabetes, we'd love to encourage you to revisit our previous installment of the Transition Education series on the topic of being your own advocate, which is available for viewing on the Hoag Health YouTube channel. It's great if you haven't seen it. It's a great time to check that out. And if you saw it, but maybe you would like a refresher, it's always there for you to take another look. We can go to the next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about what when it comes to communication, but who are you going to be communicating with regarding your diabetes during this season? Well, certainly your parents, whoever it is that is back home and coordinating your arrival back for the holidays. You're going to be wanting to discuss those expectations in advance, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. You'll also be wanting to keep those lines of communication open while you are at home visiting. And that's the same for any siblings or other family members in your home. There's always different dynamics, different families regarding siblings. Maybe you're really looking forward to seeing your siblings and they're really supportive of your diabetes needs. And maybe that may not be the case for you. And so that's causing some anxieties. Being prepared to communicate about that and with your siblings, really important. Your friends that you're hoping to see back home, these are people that may know you and your diabetes, and that can be really comfortable. Or maybe you've been diagnosed since you've been away, and so this is the first time that they are going to be, doing that midnight in and out run with you, and you're making sure that you have your insulin with you and you're ready to bolus for that extra special snack or whatever the situation is. TSA is taking a hard turn away from friends and family, right? You may be communicating with TSA if you're flying for the holidays, and we're going to talk more in depth about travel. So hold on, we'll get there. And same with flight attendants. If you are traveling by airplane, you are going to be interacting with all kinds of folks in the airport, including TSA, including desk agents, and also flight attendants, and also strangers. So you're like, who doesn't fall into all of this category? Apparently everyone does. So strangers, you might run into them at the airport. You might be running into them when you run to the store to grab something for your mom when you're helping with Thanksgiving. There's really so many scenarios where you could be interacting with folks that you don't know, where maybe they're asking a question about your devices, or maybe you're in a situation where you could use some assistance. And so you need to be able to figure out how you're going to communicate with someone that you don't have previous knowledge or relationship with. Next slide, please. How? Okay, we talked about what? We talked about who. We're going to talk about how. So some of this might seem really standard. You're like, I communicate with people every single day. That's okay. We'll go over it anyways. Something that's really key about communication, successful communication, is sometimes preparing for it and not going off the cuff. Of course, we can always go off the cuff, but sometimes we want to think in advance about who we're going to be interacting with, what we're going to want to communicate to them, and how we're going to deliver that communication. So for example, verbal communication, which is what I'm doing with you right now. So this could also be something like discussing the holidays and anything relevant to your diabetes on a phone call prior to coming home. It could also potentially be an in-person verbal conversation. Written communication, I'm not expecting that you're sitting with a quill and ink, writing and attaching a letter to an owl and sending it off, but probably more likely that you're going to be shooting off a text message. Maybe you'll send an email, or if you're a little old school, maybe you are sending some handwritten notes. It's always possible. But there's always the potential for misunderstanding the most, I think, with written communication, especially text and email. So good to think in advance, again, what you want to say and what the tone is, so that you can manage expectations and make sure that everyone's on the same page during this season, because we certainly don't want any unnecessary conflict during the holidays if we can avoid it. And then there's demonstrating by example. So this is something that we do every single day when we choose how we act towards people, or what values we want to live out. And this is something that you might do in this kind of scenario by communicating with, let's say, a parent, and let's say you tell them, I don't need you to be overly involved in my diabetes care. I've got it under control. So those are what your words are saying. But what are your actions saying? Are you not giving insulin at meals? Are you ignoring your CGM alarms? If that's the case, maybe those actions are not demonstrating what it is that you committed to. However, if you tell your parents, don't worry about it, I got it, and they, are like, okay, let's give it a chance and see how it's going to go. And then you're out there and you are doing the things that you've committed to doing. And it doesn't mean being perfect. It just means that you are putting the effort forth and following through. That can be a really helpful way of communicating when you're talking about expectations around your diabetes and anything else that might come up during this holiday season. Do you have anything to add on that, Michelle?
No, I think those are all wonderful. I was going to say, with demonstrating by example, it goes back to sort of the self-advocacy piece, and how do you live your life with diabetes, and more likely than not, going off to college allows you to sort of live your, perhaps you've been living your life a little bit more of in an adult kind of way. For example, taking on a lot more of your diabetes management, and doing sort of different pieces like calling in your prescriptions, et cetera, that perhaps you weren't doing before you left for college. So I think these are all excellent points, Samantha.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And thank you for underscoring that there as well. Ready for the next slide, please. So we're going to dive into talking about travel, which we introduced there a little bit ago. Coming home from school or moving away from home, this might be the first time that you're traveling alone to get back home. And there are definitely some special considerations to take into account in regards to traveling and type 1 diabetes, especially during this busy holiday season, which can be a little bit more difficult to navigate than traveling in the off season. So we will talk about those things on the next slide. Thank you. So when you are traveling, there are some things that you're going to want to do to prepare. One of those things, and I think we've probably mentioned this next point in all of our presentations so far because it fits in with every subject, but you're going to want to wear a medical ID. And that can be a bracelet, maybe it's a necklace, maybe it's a slider on your smartwatch, or a tag on your belt. There's so many things out there. Really just pick one, anything that works for you. And just know that that is a helpful thing in case something were to occur unexpectedly while you're traveling and you needed assistance, you weren't able to communicate about what you need, that someone can look at your medical ID and it can speak for you when you may not be able to speak for yourself. It's a really easy thing to do, and it's pretty innocuous. Like, even if you're someone that's a little bit more shy about your diabetes, It's not going to stand out. It's just going to be there in case someone needs to see it. So something to keep in mind if you don't normally wear one, which we would still advise any time is a good time for medical ID. It's the accessory that goes with every outfit. But you're going to want to especially have something like that during the holidays when you're traveling. And I've even used like one of those car seat slider things that says like medical alert, and I've put it on a backpack while I'm traveling. So that way, if the bag gets separated from me and it has my supplies in it, someone can reach me. And also, again, just in case of an emergency, it's just nice to have that with you. So lots of options. Wear your medical ID. You're going to also want to prepare and pack all of the diabetes supplies that you may need during your trip. Make a list and check it at least twice, just like Santa. There's nothing worse than being somewhere where you may not be able to have quick access to backup supplies or to be able to call someone. If you're in an airport, that can be a tough place to get someone to bring you something. So if you have all the things you need, then you are good to go. This is also important for road trips, really any sort of trip. Make a list, make sure you know what's on it, make sure that you pack all those things, and even keep the list with you so that way you can refer to it on your way back. No need to reinvent the wheel. If you're traveling by air, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about air travel versus road travel, but if you're going to travel by airplane, you're going to want to make sure that you have a carry-on or designated medical bag that stays with you where all of your supplies are, because you don't want to be separated from them and you don't want them to be in your packed luggage for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about shortly. And if you're traveling on the road, especially if you are traveling solo, a little road trip by yourself, it's a nice idea to keep your supplies next to you or nearby. So if you need to grab a glucose tablet, you need a pen, a sight change, whatever, all of those things are easy and convenient for you to grab, that you don't have to kind of pull over, go open the back of the trunk, be digging through things. It's more of a hassle than you need, especially if there's some sort of stressful little thing that comes up. So keep that stuff close to you. And then when you're returning back to school, it's a good time to bring supply refills back if you are someone that gets your prescriptions or your durable medical equipment sent to your home address, or that it's something that you pick up somewhere in your hometown. This is a great time to check in, pick those things up, and take them on back with you. Next slide, please. So if you are driving alone, which many folks do this time of year, and really even if you are driving with someone else, these are still things to keep in mind. They're just more pertinent if you are traveling by yourself. One thing you might consider is the timing of your drive. Maybe you know that there's a certain time of day that you're struggling with your blood sugars, that you might need to pull over a whole bunch, or that where there could be more issues, but you know that if you start your trip at a different time of the day, that you'll likely have steady blood sugars and it should be smooth sailing. And that might influence when you decide to hit the road. You will also want to be prepared for potential high blood sugars, potential low blood sugars while you're driving. Just kind of have an idea in your head. If one of those things happens, how are you going to know about it? Is your CGM set? Do you check your blood sugars regularly? Do you know how to recognize those signs, those feelings in your body? Do you know what plan of action you'll take? Do you have the supplies with you to make sure that you can handle those things safely and efficiently? So that's something that you'll want to prepare for. I also think it's smart to plan for stops along your route, even if you're not planning to stop. Maybe you have a period of time on the road where, as long as you have your plans and they're going the way they're supposed to, that you don't have to stop. It's still a good idea to know, is there a gas station that I feel safe, going to if there's an issue, either with your car or with your blood sugars, or you need a snack or something, you need a restroom, right? There's so many things that can come up when you're driving. Maybe you have a friend or family member who lives along the way or doesn't live too far off the beaten path. So if something did come up, you could give them a call and they could be there in a jiffy, or they could give you directions to somewhere that you need to go. And safety and backup plans, that kind of is just a follow on to planning for stops, even if you're not planning to stop. Just kind of knowing, what's the layout of this trip? Who are your helpers along the way if you need them? Maybe if it's a long drive, but you want to try to make it all the way through. Maybe that there's someone that would always have, a warm couch waiting for you if you needed to spend the night somewhere along the way. Those are just nice things to know. And even if you're not in a position where you have access to those additional helpers or tools, there's still a lot that can help give us peace of mind, and certainly give peace of mind to your loved ones waiting for you at home, to make sure that you make that trip safely. Next slide. So we talked about driving. Now we'll talk about flying. This is something that I think gives people with type 1 diabetes, I don't want to say more anxiety. I think some people worry about driving, some people worry about flying, some people worry about flying even if they don't have diabetes. So we have our own little concerns there. One thing you can do is ask your provider for a travel letter for going through security. For many folks, they get that letter and they never even need to take it out of their bag. They keep it in there for years. They don't even realize how old it is, because no one ever asks. But it's a nice thing to have for your peace of mind in case someone does hassle you, whether it's going through security or maybe on the plane or something like that, where someone says, why do you have those needles, or what's that stuff you have with you, or they try to take it away from you, or whatever the situation is, that you can say, hey, this is a letter from my provider. It says I'm under their care for type 1 diabetes and that I need these essential supplies and that they have to stay with me. So if that's something you have not obtained, this is a good time to have that chat with your provider and get that. Another important thing to remember is you're going to want to keep your supplies with you and not in your checked baggage. As we mentioned earlier, you don't want those things to be separated. If they go into checked baggage, bags can be lost. There's also a lack of temperature control in the places where your bags are being stored. Also, those bags get thrown around a lot. So for things that shouldn't be jostled too much or can break easily, not a place that you want to keep those things. And you want to remember your important things. You'll make your list and you'll check it twice. And some of those things on that list will be glucagon, syringes and pen needles, pump and CGM supplies, if that's what you're using, and your short and long acting insulin. Even if you're on a pump, this is a great time to have a backup plan with your short and long acting insulin, so that you have something in case your pump malfunctions and it takes a few days to get that working again.
On that point, I would suggest also maybe check in with your endocrinologist before you travel, just to make sure that you're dosing for short and long acting if you were to switch off of your pump. If it malfunctions, to make sure that those you have the correct dosing for that.
Such a great reminder, Michelle. And to that point, if you don't have the prescription active, that conversation with them about the dosing, great time to also get a fresh prescription and check that whatever supplies you have for your backup, if there's something that needs to be replaced, that would be a good time to check in with your doctor and get those things handled. In addition to those very important items, an additional important item is the snack bag, right? So bringing snacks for all of your potential blood sugar scenarios, something to keep in mind with the times that we're living in. Maybe previously you kind of made decisions on the fly. Oh, didn't even mean to say on the fly. But maybe you went to airport shops or restaurants instead of packing things with you. And it's important to know that these things have been a little bit less predictable during COVID. Some airports may not have all of their shops open, or the restaurant that you always go to when you're flying may not be available. Or depending on the timing of your flights, they may not be open just at the time that you're needing it to be. So it's helpful to not rely on those things if you can avoid it. Things that you might want to bring with you for your low blood sugars. Glucose tablets, obviously, that's something that we talk about a lot. Fruit snacks, candy, the drill. You've been doing this. Whatever you carry with you normally is probably good. You may not want to do juice or like beverage items, liquid glucose, etc. You definitely can take them with you through security, but I will say that it's possible that you could be challenged. And the question is, do you need the extra stress? And only you can answer that. Like maybe orange juice is the only way to go for you. And so you're willing to have that conversation with TSA, or maybe you're like, you know what, the less interaction I have to have going through TSA, the better. I'll bring candy and maybe I'll buy a pop on the other side of security. And then maybe your blood sugar is not low. Maybe you're just hungry, or maybe your blood sugar ends up being high due to the stress of the adrenaline and travel. So some items that people might carry with them for those scenarios, nut butter packets, jerky, dehydrated veggies, little crunch, trail mix. These are all things that travel pretty well and are either fairly carb neutral or have maybe less carbs and are higher in protein and fat. Next slide. So when you are flying, as we've talked about, we do have to think about going through security. There are definitely different ways of doing things. Different people feel more comfortable going through with a lot of precautions. Other folks, kind of throw that to the wind and they just kind of roll with the punches. So you have to think about, what kind of person are you? What's going to make you feel most comfortable? Some people will just walk through the regular line to take their chances with the devices and the body scanner. Obviously, some people have plenty of anecdotal evidence to say that there's no issues that can come up with that. But it's also important to note that for many device manufacturers, your device's warranty may be voided by going through the body scanner. So it's just important to do your research and see what your comfort level is, if you want to make that choice, or if you would prefer to get a hand check of your supplies, which TSA can do if you request it, and or requesting a pat down as an alternative to the body scanner. That may take a little longer, especially if they are understaffed. So just also know that as a person with diabetes going through security during the holidays, you may need a little extra time so you don't feel rushed. TSA also offers a screening assistance program in the form of something called Tsa Cares, which is a helpline that provides travelers with medical conditions with additional assistance throughout the security process. You can call them 72 hours prior with questions, and there's an online form that you can fill out to request assistance for actually going through the checkpoint. I've utilized that myself, and I can say I've had experiences where it was very helpful. I've been to other airports where it wasn't as helpful. I've also done it without TSA Cares many, many times, and I've had good and bad experiences. So, I think you just really have to think about what's going to feel best for you and just give it a shot. Give yourself plenty of time, stay patient, and be prepared to advocate for yourself and educate folks if you are stopped and questioned about your diabetes supplies. It's a good idea to be comfortable with these things anyway, as we keep kind of drilling in. Self-advocacy is so important, especially in this case as a solo traveler, when you are the only person there to advocate for your needs. You may also want to think about what you'd like to do if you're asked to undergo additional screening, which can happen to anyone going through, but also, sometimes with diabetes supplies, maybe something throws off an alert and then the TSA agent says, oh, we'd like to do an additional check. Would you like to stay here, or would you like to go to a private room to be screened? And that's your choice to make. Personally, I prefer to be there with everyone. I'm like, hey, this is cool. Everyone's here. It's a party, no big deal. That makes me feel more comfortable than like being let off somewhere private, alone, where no one knows where I'm going. But for other people, like maybe they're feeling shy and they don't want to be screened in front of other people. So it's a personal choice. You'll probably also need to remind TSA that you can't have your supplies be separated from you during this process. It's a good rule of thumb really for anyone, not just people with diabetes, to keep their luggage within their eyesight during screening. But especially because those are high stakes luggage items, we definitely don't want to have to be searching for those if we turn our back and then they're gone. Some folks may also choose to receive a medical pre-boarding pass from their airline. For most airlines, this is something that you can request after you get through security. You're on the other side, you go to your gate and there's a desk there for your airline, and you can say, hey, I have a medical condition that, would be helpful to me if I could get that medical pre-boarding pass. They usually don't ask you, invasive questions or anything like that. It's pretty much the honor system. And that's something that, again, personal preference. Some people are comfortable with that. Other folks may not feel that they need it or may not feel comfortable. That's okay. It's really up to you. A couple of reasons why you might opt for this option, especially during a busier travel season, are, first of all, the priority opportunity to place your supplies and carry on in the overhead, which can help you to avoid forced bag check. So basically what happens with a medical pre-board is they'll board the families with children under 2. They'll help people that might have mobility challenges get onto the airplane. And then they will usually ask if anyone has a medical pre-boarding pass that they can then board. And then you're still, maybe in like the 3rd or 4th small group of people to get on the plane. So you can choose your seat if it's a first come, first serve, or even if you already have your seat booked, you can get settled, put your carry-on, your medical supplies, either, under the seat in front of you or above you. And that way, that there won't be a lack of space. Sometimes if you're like the last person to get on the plane, or even on a crowded flight, it could happen towards the middle of boarding where they say, hey, there's no more overhead space. We need to start checking people's carry-ons. And that can be an anxiety-inducing situation for folks with type 1 diabetes, especially if you have all of your supplies with you, which we advise, because you don't want to be separated from them and you don't want them to go into the belly of the plane, which lacks that temperature control. So that's one reason. Another thing that's really helpful is you will have the opportunity to chat with the flight crew about your diabetes as you board, because it won't be rushed. They'll be greeting everyone one by one. Again, this is something not everyone's comfortable with, but for a lot of folks, it's a good opportunity just to say, hey, this is my name. I'm traveling by myself today. I have type 1 diabetes. I don't anticipate needing anything today outside of the norm. But if I did, I might need an orange juice, or I might need a Sprite or something like that. And it kind of just gives them the heads up, you are traveling alone and you have diabetes. So if something were to happen, that they would know, oh, okay, this traveler might need some expedited assistance. But again, personal choice, something that you can determine if that is going to work for you or not. And you can always experiment with it. Maybe you try it on the way there. You don't like the way it feels. You don't do it again, or vice versa. Maybe you don't do it. And then you're like, gosh, I would have felt more comfortable if I had done that differently. Then you have a chance to do it again. So we did talk momentarily about the additional carry-on that you might be able to have for your medical supplies. Just wanted to emphasize again, this is something that you can research in advance and find out if you can have an additional bag dedicated to your supplies, which can be nice, especially if you're a chronic overpacker. Something I can relate to. So with all of that said, we've talked about preparing to head home, making the trip itself, but I'm going to ask Michelle, what can folks expect when they arrive home?
Thank you, Samantha. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about being back home. We've heard incredible tips and tricks and advice and all your options for the logistics of traveling home. Thanks to Samantha, we're going to talk a little bit now about being back home and what to expect from coming back home from being away at school. So being back home can bring up many different emotions. Some things that jump out at me are exciting. It can be exciting to be home. It can be exhausting to be home. It can be stressful. It can be relaxing and relieving. It can be conflicting. It can be all of these different things simultaneously, or it can be some for some of you and then different ones for other ones. Everyone's household and home life look different. And so coming back home from living off on your own for several months can be a different experience for everyone. So something to be mindful of, and trying to speak to the experience as a whole. And sort of as Samantha mentioned initially, take from this what you will, and see if some of this can be helpful to navigate the trip home. Next slide. So adjusting back home can be rocky. It doesn't mean it will be, it doesn't mean it has to be, but it can be. So some of the things that can attribute to that experience are your roles may have changed, very likely. They likely have changed. You have been living off on your own for several months at college as an adult, as an independent student. And so coming back home under the same roof as your parent can be a different experience in the way that you sort of go about your day. Your room might look different. Some parents may have turned your room into a home office from, in this work from home life that we are still sort of living. Others, your room might look the exact same. Something to just think ahead of time, because if it does look different when you are home, that may be shocking. So something to think about. Your daily routine will be off. You're used to going from class to clubs, to the cafeteria, to your dorm, etc. And so when you're home, you may not be as physically active. You may not be in a routine really at all, because it's a time to relax and rest and rejuvenate your energy a little bit. But just keep in mind that your routine will be off. Whenever a routine is off, it can cause a fluctuation in emotions and particularly in blood sugars. Thinking about maintaining your independence with your diabetes management. Sort of how I alluded to it a little bit earlier. When you left for college, you were likely in a routine with your parents as it related to your diabetes management. Some of you, your parent might have been quite responsive during the night. If you had a low or a high, perhaps they follow your Dexcom on their phone. Perhaps it was your routine for them to test you every so often throughout the night. Likely being away at school, you've not had this same routine. So thinking about, I would encourage you to maintain the independence that you have been living with at college in terms of your diabetes management, and bring that home with you. And so if your parent is asking about how can they sort of jump back into maybe the role of taking over some of the night shifts, perhaps, I'd really encourage you to try to maintain the independence, because you've been doing such a great job. And that is a part of also having a conversation with your parent about presenting yourself as and the adult that you are now. Thinking about navigating personal space. If your room unfortunately is changed a little bit, maybe that's not really a space for you to have at home, to be one for you to escape to relax in. Figure out what space there is at home for you, whether it's whatever space brings you calm. So that maybe if being back home in the midst of a lot of family is hectic sometimes, where can you sort of go to get a little bit of personal space to sort of reset before you rejoin. And lastly, overall, I mean, I think the main point and the main theme of this webinar presentation is communication. The way you communicate with your parent, with your family, is likely to be different. You went away for college for several months. Most of you have gone to sort of this new school. Maybe you didn't know anyone. Maybe you didn't know your roommate. And so you've been presenting yourself as this adult version of yourself, appropriately so. And now it's sort of your opportunity to come home as your adult self. And sometimes that coming home for the holidays can be the first time when your relationship with your parents switches from sort of child to adult relation to now sort of adult to adult parent relationship. So the way that you will communicate with your parent will likely be different. They're still your parent. You're still staying in their house, and there are, of course, ground rules and etiquette to follow. But that being said, just be mindful of the way that you are communicating with them, and take it as an opportunity to try and sort of navigate this next phase of your relationship with your parent. Overall, communicating ahead of time can be so helpful before you even get home for the holidays. Try to talk about some of these things or even think about them. Whether, as Samantha mentioned, you can talk about it over the phone, you can text about it, you can email your parent if that is your preferred method. But communicating ahead of time will really help us sort of mitigate a lot of the potential stress that can come with being home for the holidays. Next slide. Managing expectations goes right into that with what to expect from coming home. Managing expectations can help us to really calm any tension, mitigate any stress that is likely to happen in terms of household, being under the same roof as your parents, the responsibilities that sort of go with that house, running the house. Talk about what you are expected to be partaking in. So for example, laundry. You've likely been doing your laundry on your own while you've been away at school. When you come home, are you still going to be doing your laundry? That is a question that I think is valuable to think about and to ask your parents. Some parents are really, wanting to do everything for you because they haven't been able to do that for several months, and you are their child, you are their baby, and they want to help you out and let you really receive some respite at home. And others may, provide that same love and warmth and support in other ways while expecting you to do your laundry. So something like even laundry can lead to maybe some tension when you're at home. So just talk about it beforehand. Figure out who's going to do that, who's going to wash the dishes, what are your sort of tasks and responsibilities in helping to run the house when you're at home. Thinking about errands too. If you have siblings, are you going to be expected to pick them up from school? If you're maybe struggling with how to fit in sort of social time with your friends because now you have all these household responsibilities, maybe you can, on your way back from seeing your friend for several hours, maybe you can get groceries for dinner. Have those conversations with your parent about how you can sort of juggle both of them and make both of them happen. Thinking about time management, this I will put the onus on you, the student, the adult, the college student. Think ahead of time about whether or not maybe you have a ton of doctor's visits scheduled for when you're home. It is a really prime time to see all of your providers, your dentist, your endocrinologist, etc. I know at Chalk, many of our patients, we have maybe been doing telehealth for quite some time. We see in person around the holidays, which is lovely. But on the patient side, on your side, just know whether or not you should be expecting to schedule doctor's appointments into your long weekend or your week at home. Thinking about time split between family and friends. Review your plans with your parent for the time that you're home and figure out what their expectations are in terms of having you around and when, and compare that with your own expectations. Some parents might like to sort of plan every second of every day with you because they missed you so much. That may be different than what you are expecting, which can perhaps lead to some tension. Other parents also might be just expecting that you're gonna, you have your time filled up with friends and other activities, and they might not have squeezed in any time with you for you and them, sort of like one-on-one time. Just consider sort of the time management aspect between your family and your friends and try to make time for both and have a balance between the two. And again, talk with your parent about what the expectation is. Also to note that especially around the holidays, there are a ton of family get-togethers. Some of you might have specific traditions around the holidays. And are you expected to attend all of those? Does that take up all of your time when you're home? Just things to think about and talk with your parents to make sure that you have an accurate expectation of what your time home will look like. In terms of social activities, you were just living on your own for several months, sort of coming and going as you pleased. That was your routine on your own, independently of your parents for several months. So things like curfew, when you are coming back and you are under their roof for the holidays, talk with them about what are the expectations around curfew. What is the time that you're expected to be home? What does curfew look like for you guys? Something important to expect so that there aren't any conflicts that arise that can then sort of throw off the whole vibe of the time around the holidays for you as a family. Thinking about drinking, talk with your parents about your expectation, I guess, around drinking and being social when you're home for the holidays. If you've been away at school and you have been drinking and you have been socializing, you've been going to parties, and if that is your expectation of how you're going to spend your time when you come home for the holidays, it will be a little different because you're in your parents' home rather than being on your own in your dorm. So there's someone else to consider. So I would really encourage you to have an open conversation with them. As the drinking relates to driving, I do want to highlight, I don't know, sometimes people forget to consider this aspect, but a lot of you are on college campuses that are very walkable. Some of you don't even have cars at school because you can walk everywhere, you can take public transportation or whatever it may be. And so perhaps you are socializing and maybe drinking and you're not ever having to think about drinking and driving to get home. When you are at home for the holidays, driving does sort of enter the picture. Typically in Southern California, everything is spread out. There's not very much that is walkable. So think ahead of time of what that will look like. If you're going to a friend's house or you're going out to a bar or something, and if you will be drinking, plan ahead for which ride share you're going to use or which friend will be a designated driver, or talk with your parent about perhaps if they can pick you up. This is a conversation I would definitely encourage you to have with your parent, and something to just plan logistically ahead of time. In terms of diabetes and driving, so remember, you are an adult, you've been living on your own the past few months. Diabetes and drinking. If you've been drinking away at school, you've been doing it for the past few months on your own. You've been managing your diabetes and drinking and how that has been going for you. It's important to have a conversation with your parents because they're going to be worried about your safety, how your diabetes will be affected with you drinking, especially if this is like a new to sort of something that you've been doing. Have a conversation with them about how you typically manage your diabetes when you're drinking so that they know that you are being safe and that they don't have to continue to worry. Be open and honest and transparent with them, and just let them know that you're being safe and you're on top of it. Next slide. So holiday foods, very relevant topic for having type 1 and being home for the holidays. Things to think about, there are practical considerations and there are social considerations around holiday foods. So keep in mind that all of the delicious holiday food that is around is often higher in fat and carb content, meaning that they will very likely affect your blood sugars, and what your typical numbers are may not be what you will see over the holidays. Just make sure that you are pre-bolusing further ahead of time. That might be one approach to keeping your blood sugar sort of even and on track. Definitely pre-bolus just in general. If you've never pre-bolused before, I encourage you to start now and start over the holidays as a holiday gift to yourself, because it will help you feel so much better when you are not dealing with a high blood sugar all day and all night, and you can really focus on spending time with your loved ones. Keep track of snacking throughout the day and the night. With the holidays comes hopefully a lot of really wonderful time spent with family and friends. And sometimes that can last all day, it can last all night, it can last well into the night, and you might just be hanging out and enjoying each other's company and snacking. So keep track of what you are eating throughout the day and the night. It's easy to lose track if you can try and be mindful of how you may be snacking more around the holidays as opposed to any other time of the year. I think that will be really, really helpful so that you, again, don't have sort of like a 300 plus blood sugar for several hours. And also double check nutrition facts labels. You may be a really excellent carb counter, but I always encourage everyone to periodically double check the nutrition facts labels to make sure that your carb counting is still accurate, the serving size is still what you thought it was, and that the carb count is still accurate. So again, we want to try to help you prevent some of those high blood sugars. Social considerations to think about around food, around the holidays for those of us with type 1 diabetes. You might have family or friends commenting on whether or not you should be consuming something because you have type 1 diabetes. And I want to reference when Samantha mentioned perhaps you were diagnosed while you were away at school, and this might be your first time being around family or friends having type 1 diabetes. I would first off, I would just assume and hopefully that those families and friends are coming from a place of concern when they tell you that you should not be, or you should be consuming something, or sort of monitoring what you're eating. Let's just assume and hope that it's coming from a place of concern. That's most likely where it's coming from. They're trying to relate to you, and they're trying to keep you safe. It's really up to you to figure out how you want to respond to those questions and those comments. You can either decide to provide some brief education on what you can be eating, and that you can be eating and giving yourself insulin and actually monitoring quite effectively on your own, or you can really just come up with, and maybe ahead of time, some sort of short and sweet and simple response that effectively lets them know that you will be taking over the management of your own eating and drinking, but thank them for their inquiring and their concern. But something to think about ahead of time and how you might respond to those. Thinking about real sugar versus artificial sweeteners. So do think ahead of time, consider whether or not you want to eat all the sweets that have real sugar in it, or do you want to go for artificially sweetened sweets and desserts? It's up to you. Real sugar will modify your blood sugars in a way that artificial sweeteners may not. So just something to consider. There are options out there. In terms of food and alcohol, make sure that you are eating if you're also drinking alcohol. And again, this is a time of being social and hanging out with family and friends. And sometimes you could be eating or drinking just periodically throughout a long period of time. Make sure that you're continuing to eat food while you're drinking. And if you do have any questions about how alcohol specifically can affect your blood sugar, ask your endocrinologist or your endocrinology team even before you get home, and make sure you get those questions answered. And lastly, to reiterate what Samantha had mentioned as well, self-advocacy is so important in all aspects of your life, but especially around the holidays. Practice asserting autonomy over your own food and drink choices. You're an adult, you can make well-informed decisions, especially when it comes to food and what you are eating or drinking as it relates to your diabetes. You've likely been using these skills away at school when others have commented on your diabetes, the same way you would have told maybe a roommate or a peer what you can or cannot be eating or drinking. Practice bringing those skills home and talk with your family or your friends sort of through that adult independent lens that you've been presenting at school. Next slide, please. All right, so looking at diabetes management and some things to consider. Again, when you're at home, your routine may be off. Your time was structured in a specific way at school with class activities, etc. Being at home, your routine may be off, which can then affect your typical blood sugar movement. You may be more or less active. Think about your settings to see if you need adjustments. If you may be less active if you're just coming home to just veg out. That is 100% your call and a great choice at that. But just know that you may need some more insulin. and think ahead of time. And also reach out to your doctor if you have questions on maybe doing a settings change for just the time when you're home. Looking at monitoring your blood sugars. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but thinking about overnight, will your parents help monitor those highs and lows? I would encourage you to continue to maintain the independent diabetes management that you've been doing while you've been away at school, and bring that home into the house where your parents live. Sort of bring your independent routine back home if you can. And if you do need help, you can certainly ask for it. This is not about like, you can never receive help, you can never ask for help. But try to balance the incredible independent adult spirit that you've been fostering with also having your parents as a support, but they don't necessarily need to take over some of those pieces of management for you. Same with Dexcom. How will high and low alarms be addressed? If your parent is, knocking on your bedroom door every hour because an alarm is going off, maybe have a conversation with them about how you are also getting those alarms and you are responding to them appropriately, and maybe request that they check in with you maybe at the end of the night each night, or once a day, or having a check-in time instead of sort of every single time an alarm goes off. And I do want to highlight, if you're struggling with managing your diabetes, you're not alone. Freshman year, sophomore year, anytime in college, anytime, as an adult, especially an emerging adult, young adult, can be really, really challenging. And so you are not alone in that. And there are resources available to seek help, including therapists who specialize in working with individuals living with type 1 diabetes. So know that those resources are out there. And if you're looking for specific ones, reach out to your endocrinology team, and we can certainly provide that to you. Next slide.
All right. I'm going to jump in here, Michelle. Thank you so much. Those were so many important points about the various aspects of what people face when they're heading home for the holidays. And certainly, this won't surprise anyone because we've been talking about it the whole time, but we really can't emphasize enough the importance of supporting and maintaining a healthy family structure by utilizing communication during this time. Next slide. So teens, you can support yourself and your parents by talking with your parents in advance about how you're feeling and discussing expectations that you have for your time at home, as well as discussing their expectations for your time at home. These are certainly points that were well made by Michelle earlier, and I just want to emphasize them as we are getting closer to wrapping up on this important topic. But it's truly the important thing about all of this is communicating through it with the people that you care about and that care about you. And like Michelle said on the last slide, asking for help if you need it, whatever kind of help that is. If it's something really basic, or it's, you're really struggling and you could use some support in your diabetes management from your family or from your care team or whoever, this is the only way to get that help, is to communicate about it. So with that in mind, I'll shoot it back over to Michelle on the next slide.
And to jump right off of that, so parents, how can you support your team? Well, we are encouraging your kids, your young adults to start communicating, to start those conversations. What you can do directly is to help encourage this communication early on. If your child isn't initiating conversations about their plans for being home for break, initiate those on your own, and try to do it as a family, as a group, as a parent and child. Just do it maybe before you get all under one roof, and sort of get into the busyness of the holiday season. You can help them foster independence, and remember that they are developing their adult identity. Encourage your child to maintain their independence over their daily activities, whether it's their chores, their laundry, all the way up to their diabetes management and their social activities. While they're home, they're trying to balance it all. Help to foster their independence, but also keep an eye on to see if they're needing some assistance with trying to maintain some balance there. Be patient with your teen. They are figuring it all out, just like you are also, your roles with each other are changing as they're becoming an adult and they're living their sort of adult life. So be patient with the process. Discuss specifics for the weekend or the week around the holidays. Communication ahead of time is so important, and really will be helpful in having a smooth and successful holiday break. Talk about doctor's appointments, which ones need to happen, which family gatherings your teen absolutely really should go to, and which ones they maybe don't need to go to, and perhaps they can see their friends instead. Figure out what your priorities are along with your teens for the time over the holidays, and learn how you can best support them. Ask them how you can support them and try and be flexible. The way that you have supported them previously may not work with them now. They are learning their own sort of skills and strengths, and those are evolving over time. The best way to figure out how to support them is to ask. And lastly, enjoy the holidays together. It can be a stressful time. It can be a really wonderful time, especially coming off of a really long time with COVID and everyone adjusting to life in a different way. Try to enjoy the holidays together as much as possible. Next slide.
Thank you, Michelle. To underscore, these points about communication and getting education and preparing for self-advocacy and just getting the support that you need, whether it's for the physical aspects of your care, or maybe it's more about your emotional or mental health, or really anything from A to Z. Some resources and support that are available to you. If you are local to Hoag Hospital here in Orange County, we have the Herbert program for young adults with type 1 diabetes through the Diabetes Center. We host monthly happy hour gatherings that are currently online, so they are virtual. So even if you aren't local, you can still join us for those. We look forward to bringing everyone back together in person when it's safe to do so. We also do other educational events and provide resources throughout the year. So if you have any questions or would like to inquire about that, please reach out to us here at the center. Of course, CHOC, diabetes, endocrinology, Michelle herself as the transition coordinator, an excellent resource, as well as everyone else on her team. The Padre Foundation, which is a local organization that supports individuals and families with type 1 diabetes. JDRF, the American Diabetes Association, and the College Diabetes Network, CDN. There may be a chapter on your campus, and maybe there are a bunch of folks that are preparing to go home, bring their diabetes back home in a suitcase with them for Thanksgiving and for winter break and all of that. Maybe you can all commiserate and troubleshoot and support each other through this season. Next slide.
And in summary, after all of that, if your holiday visit feels strange, don't worry. This is normal. You are coming home. You're adjusting to being back home again. All of you, the teen, the young adult, the parent, the family, the sibling, everyone is adjusting to this new routine. So don't stress. It's totally normal. Communicate with your parents ahead of time. It will really help to lay out what your expectations are for your time home, whether it's a long weekend or a week or several weeks. Set and manage those expectations. Talk with your parent, with your family around what the expectations are for your time, for time together, so that you can plan accordingly. And everyone wants to enjoy this special time together. So creating an environment where that can happen is vital, and communication is vital to make that happen. So really communicate ahead of time, and hopefully with all of that excessive communication, you can create a really calm and joyful environment for you all to enjoy. Next slide.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We would love to answer any questions that may have come up during this presentation. So if you've been sitting on a question or a comment you'd like to share, this is a great time to pop them into the Q&A box. So I'll keep an eye on that momentarily in case anyone has anything they would like to ask or comment upon from this subject. In the meanwhile, we just want to let you know we really appreciate your participation with us. If you found this information to be helpful and engaging, and you would love to learn more, which certainly learning about diabetes really never stops throughout the lifetime, we'd love to have you explore our other offerings, our transition education series, and other videos available on the Hoag Health YouTube channel. And with that, it looks like everyone's questions have already been answered by our presentation. If anything comes up for you later on, maybe you're feeling a little shy right now and you don't want to have your question answered live, please know you can reach us by email. Michelle and I both have our emails on this slide, and you can also call the Mary and Dick Allen Diabetes Center at 949-764-8065. We would love to continue to be a resource for you and your family. We are wishing you a very happy, healthy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.
Thank you so much.